Welcome to this week's episode of the Full Scope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. I'm your host, Matt Van Pelt, and with me today is Full Scope IT CTO Dan Wolk. How are you today, Dan?
Pretty good. How are you doing, Matt?
I am doing great, and happy Hanukkah to you, sir. And also, we have Brian Amadeo from Business Development. How are you today, Brian?
Yeah, doing well, Matt. Nice to see everybody. Happy holidays as a whole.
All right, absolutely. And also with us today is Matthew Kelly, a member of the Full Scope IT technical team. How are you, Matthew?
Going on 3 weeks sick now, but feeling better.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're on the mend before, the holidays are in full effect. So
Yeah.
glad to have you again here with us. Okay. So this week, we're going to take a break from our buzzword and focus on the upcoming holiday season. We are going to deck the halls with holiday tech tips. So we'll just get right into it. Our first tech tip is a cybersecurity holiday tip. Make sure your staff knows about cybersecurity. Teach them again about the risks, especially fake emails and scams that happen more frequently during the holidays. A team that knows what to watch out for is the best way to protect against these cyber threats. So, anybody have any stories or examples they could share that relate to this tip? Any gotchas? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much like what we see, say, in a store. If you relate it to something retail, right? It's increased traffic, calls, emails. Actors are just going to try to slide in there and add to the chaos and hope that they catch you off guard, right? So it's awareness. I think that's the.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is due diligence. Definitely in the holiday season, I think so many people are checked out either this month or like a week before Christmas. That any scam that comes in, people are just like, I don't care. I just want to go home. Just have to, I got to travel. I got to get the kids ready for the car ride. I got to, all this crazy stuff. Got to cook food. Where all these scams come in. Hey, got a FedEx box. Who's not expecting a FedEx box? Something like that comes in,
right.
And people are just so busy with like so many other things happening this month that they're just like, I don't care. Let me just click. Sure, I'm assuming I'm expecting something, and then something happens.
Yeah, and we've said it before. The phishing emails are getting much more customized. They're using AI to generate the content, and we fully expect that they're going to start being more holiday themed and using social engineering capabilities to convince you that they're real emails, even more than ever.
At least they'll be festive, though, right?
It may be.
I mean, that's a positive. Yeah,
I keep seeing these subscription, like, oh, your subscription has ended. And it's things like, say, Netflix or things that, clearly don't have an ending necessarily. So that's the most common one I think I'm seeing out there as of late anyway, last few weeks.
Well, a lot of people can't make it through the holidays without Netflix, so that'll get a lot of attention.
Yeah, I've kind of maybe a relevant story that happened to me just today. I don't think it was a scam, but I got this weird email from a place that I hadn't ordered something from in a long time, saying that my order had shipped, and it was I'm guessing the company just made a mistake, but it was a tracking for an order in April, saying that it just shipped, but I already had it. So I don't know if it was a scam, but caution, maybe just delete said email.
I was going to ask you, what'd you do, Matt? How did you proceed?
I deleted because I'm like, well, I haven't ordered from this place in forever, so it's done.
They'll try again if it's legit, right? It's not their last
attempt. I think the company just had a little hiccup in their system, to be honest with you, but it was Bomba's.
Yeah, that's the other thing. What really requires action?
Bomba's email.
I had a tough one yesterday. I was like driving home from work, and I had a call from a 1-800 number at my house. Actually, I may or may not have Simply Safe in my house, but they called me and they're like, "Hey, your billing's wrong," and they're like, "Hey, can you we got to verify who you are. Like, can you give me your master password?" And I'm like, "Who the hell are you?" Like, absolutely not. I'm not going to give you my master password. They're like, "Okay, I respect that." And then they're like, well, your card, because I updated my card, so it was probably them, but I'm not risking that. So I was like, "Okay, can you give me the last four at least of that card?" They're like, "No." I'm like, can you give me the last one number? What is the last number on the credit card on file? They're like, can't give you that. I was like, then how am I going to trust you guys? Come on. Like, you call me from some sketchy random 1-800 number and claim you're from one of the most popular security systems in the United States, and you're not going to give me any information to confirm who you are. I'm like, okay. They were cool about it. I was cool about it. We both hung up on our separate ways. No big deal. But yeah, it was something that gave me pause. Like, oof, that's a tough one, man. Right off the bat.
Yeah, we've made the recommendation before when emails come in with links on them. Maybe it's not a good idea to click on those links, but actually go to that website. The same goes for the phone calls. Frequently, I will tell people who call me that I will call them back, and I'll look up the customer service number and make sure I'm calling into the right call center.
Yeah. Good tips all around. All right. So, our second tip is a cloud services holiday tip. Plan for scalability. Get ready for more people to visit your website by increasing your cloud services. Make sure your website and online systems can handle more visitors and sales so customers have a smooth experience. So, what are some ways companies can go about this?
One of the easiest ways would be to make sure you're using a CDN, a content delivery network. They're easier to set up than ever. Companies like Cloudflare even have free tiers where they'll cache a lot of the content from your website, especially static images, in their data centers globally, and it reduces a ton of load on your application servers. And you have to make sure you do this in conjunction with your programmers. Don't just turn it on and hope it's working right.
What is the possibility of an average website going down due to traffic these days? I mean, is it still pretty high? Like when people get the bum rush?
If you don't have some sort of caching in front of it, like Cloudflare, it can be very easy to overload web servers, especially if there isn't even a load balancer. Um, there's still a lot of websites out there that use very tried and true technology where there's just a single web server taking all the requests, and it's optimized to handle as many requests as possible. But when it's under heavy load for whatever reason, holidays, or you were mentioned in a big news article and people want to look you up, these kind of single web servers can get crushed very easily.
All right. Our third tip is a VoIP services holiday tip. Set up holiday specific features. Utilize special VoIP holiday features such as custom greetings, automatic call answering, and directing calls to the right people. This helps handle a large volume of calls effectively, maintains a professional image, and contributes to customer satisfaction, making work easier during busy times. Is there any other tools, tips for utilizing VoIP phone systems to their fullest during busier times?
I'll tell you some of the conversations that I have a lot is when people are when we're talking about their system or changing or upgrading or whatever. It's a lot of it has to do with just how well it's set up to begin with, and whether they manage that or whether a provider manages that. Like how you have your settings to go from one person to another, or if in an absence, or if someone has a do not disturb and things like that. But super easy usually to, like, if we know someone's on PTO or something, right, and you can remove them from a call circle or something along that line. So I think VoIP is pretty awesome these days, and the features are really easy to use and really rich. So
Yeah, getting your holiday hours correct should be reviewed every holiday season that comes up. It can really help a lot of people who are calling in to get the right message instead of getting dropped into a queue that nobody may be checking on that particular day.
Great. Well, we'll move on to our tip number 4, business continuity holiday tip. Conduct a pre holiday check. Before things get really busy for the holidays, check your business plans for keeping things running. Make sure your backup systems work and that everyone who needs to know understands how to recover from issues. Any stories, examples? And well, I guess first we'll start off. How often should you review these plans with your group?
That's a loaded question. Quarterly? I don't know. I don't know what real
You can
life. I
make
don't
it
know
up.
what
Nobody's
real life
Quarterly
is,
is
but probably
the
quarterly.
easy answer.
Yeah, I don't think you have to do any more than that.
No.
But I think that's reasonable. Maybe even a couple times a year, depending on whether you're prepping, like what your seasonality might be, depending on what your business is. But holidays for
Things
sure.
tend to
Good
fail when
excuse.
they're under stress. And I've heard plumbers are most busy on Thanksgiving evening. So
I've heard that too, actually.
it would be a good time if your servers are handling any extra holiday load. Definitely, you want to look into whether they're set up right and the content delivery networks, if they're configured, are they configured to handle extra load. And there are systems out there that'll stress test your servers, and that may be something that you want to redo yearly, because the customer base may change year to year and your servers may need to handle extra load.
Yeah, this story I have on this too, especially with kind of on the business continuity side of it as well, and checking. And I don't remember if I told this last week because this is like one of my go-to stories. But I had an MSP years and years ago, and I was going on a prospect call with a new client, and I was like, "Hey, they were like." I was like, why am I here? What's going on? What can I help you with? And they just told me this crazy story about their backup disaster recovery. How, like you said, like they finally needed it that one time after how many years. They're like, all right, somebody opened an email, something crazy happened. So, they call their MSP. They're like, hey, IT company, finally it's here. Let's restore some stuff. IT companies like, sure. And they go and look and nobody checks the backups. So the backups are successful, but they're successfully failing. So they lost. They lost 3 months of data. The last successful backup they had was 3 months. And this is a real estate company. I mean, they have tons of stuff going on, purchases, tons of invoices going back and forth and proposals. And it was just like, hey, we just lost 3 months of your data because no one was actually checking it. So that's where part of, and when I say quarterly, audits of this, it's a lot of it too is, okay, that's awesome that you're taking backups, but are you checking the backups? Have you actually tried to recover from one of these backups? I think that's like a crucial part that a lot of companies just say, are you taking backups? Yes, we are. And then that's it. That's the end of the conversation. It doesn't progress to that next step of, are you checking these backups? Are they going to work in one of these, like you said, Thanksgiving night, Christmas Day, disaster recovery situations? Am I going to be safe? I think that's, taking it the next step to double check that. That's huge.
Yeah, Dan and I were working on a project recently, and they had found out that their backups hadn't been working for months. And and it was all hands on deck. Like, why is this happening? How do we fix it? What can we do to prevent this? And I think there's a bigger picture here too. So we can have all these ideas and plans in place, right? But what is the policy to deal with that problem once it comes up? And is that in writing? And have you practiced that? Has that have been communicated within your organization? So yeah, even if we have a plan, does everybody know what that is? And is there a place to go reference that in the event of something actually happening?
Yeah, it's like during the event when that's happening, that's not the time to bust the binder out. Be like, hey, what are we doing? Oh wait, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're doing. Nobody knows
Right.
until it happens, and then the binder comes out, and everyone's just like, sure, let's just read.
Yeah. Is there a binder?
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. That's crazy.
Like,
I'm assuming.
Like, oh yeah.
Well, and sometimes the things come up that aren't in the binder, and you need to know that the your vendors and your programmers and application providers are ready and available to help you when critical issues do come up. Last holiday season, we had an e-commerce provider customer, and they hadn't hardened their servers to handle certain credit card attacks, and their servers were being attacked to try to find valid credit card numbers. And it became apparent very quickly because it was bringing down lots of the e-commerce sites. And we were able to use rate limiting rules on Cloudflare to help really lock down those pages so that they couldn't be attacked without changing any of the underlying code. And um, having the right team together that's available when you really need them can go a long way to help with business continuity, as well as just having the binder for the expected attacks.
Yeah, we keep mentioning like binder, but the other part of that is like, oh yeah, we have all that. It's on our shared drive. What if that's the issue? What if that's part of the problem? Uh, so the binder thing is, sounds old school, but good old analog paper is still a great way in the event of some kind of a situation. So just want to throw that out there that it's not some weird old school thing. It should be some actual documentation on hand.
All right. Well, that brings us to tip number 5, compliance holiday tip. Review data handling procedures. Take a good look at how you handle and protect customer information. Make sure your team knows how important it is to follow privacy rules, especially when you have a lot of customer data during the holidays. So, how important is this for even companies that don't like handle credit cards or medical information?
Well, I think it goes back to the first discussion topic about making sure your staff knows about cybersecurity, um, and that when we are trying to run out the door and get back home during the holidays, it can be very easy to get lax with how we handle things, and um, these are the kind of attacks that the bad guys are ready to do. They know human nature and they will take advantage of that. And all these procedures should be in place before the holidays come about. Just keep on doing what you were doing, and do it the way things were set up. Don't start scribbling credit card numbers down on pieces of paper just because somebody calls and says the website's down and you need to get an order through. You need to be diligent.
I think a big part of it too is company culture, where I've seen a lot of companies on completely opposite sides of the spectrum, where company culture, as in like policies, do we care? It's obviously top down. So does the boss care or don't care? I've seen in our MSP, we offer certain security trainings. A lot of our clients take it very seriously. I've got emails like, "Hey, this is great. Can my spouse take this? Like, we want everybody to take this. Like, this is great." And I've had opposite where we set everything up for them and they never log into it. So I think a lot of it is company culture, especially from the top down. Like, do we care about these policies? It's awesome to have policies in place, but if nobody cares about them, nobody takes a look at them. They just want a discount on their cyber security or their cyber insurance to say, "Hey, we have this in place." That's it. Like, yeah, that's not the best. So I think it's very important for business owners to create a culture where zero tolerance or close to it on these cybersecurity policies that have been set up, instead of just being completely lax. Because if you're lax as a business owner, everybody's going to be lax. And I think that's very important, especially when you get into compliance. And even if you don't have to be compliant, I mean, it's one of those things that you got to really be a stickler about being secure, following these policies. Because if you don't, nobody's going to do it.
And I think PCI compliance in particular, they do a very good job of giving you specifics about what you need to do and what rules you need to follow. And they're not just doing it in order to make things look good. So going through the compliance and just saying you did it is really not going to help your business. All these rules are in place for very good reasons. Keeping guest networks and credit card handling networks and HVAC networks and all these things separate is done for a good reason. And I would insist on going through the PCI compliance and making sure you're answering all of the audits truthfully and following these rules.
I think the real question is, can we print it out and put it in a binder?
Binders for everything. One binder for every tech
Just
tip
staple them to the
we're
wall.
sending
Let's have a
out today.
bunch of binders. Just label them. Be good to go.
1 3-ring to rule them all.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, great. There are our 5 holiday tips. I believe we've officially decked the halls with holiday tech tips. So, if you're interested in learning more about any of the topics we discussed, check out our blog post called Deck the Halls with Managed IT Services. There'll be a link in this week's episode description, and you can also find it under the blog section on our website, fullscopeit.com. Okay, that brings us to our story of the week.
This is the story of the week.
Listen up!
This week's story is brought to us from Vice.com. Could we blow up the internet? Usually I would have a little blurb I would say after that, but I think that's kind of self-explanatory, and it's a good question. Could we?
Could it happen? Might be a better.
Yeah, not us. We're not saying we were gonna do it.
just to be
not
clear,
us.
right?
Inject a couple
Hypothetically,
BGP routes, called it
could
a...
someone somewhere blow up?
You know, this article is a few years old, and I do have to say I really like the artwork at the top. It's if you get a chance to click on the link, it's really excellent artwork, and it's interesting to note how little has changed since this was written 3.5 years ago. It is a very lengthy article, but it's
Yeah.
it's mostly about how science fiction is really interesting, and a lot of the internet is really well hardened from any kind of reasonable attack that may come about. And they really bring up the point that why would you go to all this trouble to try to blow up the internet when you can just get a bunch of hackers in a room to do cybersecurity attacks or DDoS attacks, and these are much more successful than you might be trying to get a bomb into a data center. And it's the infrastructure is so resilient these days, and it's even more so than when this was written 3.5 years ago. I remember a point in time when you actually could have gotten away with blowing up the internet, and at one point there was a cross street in downtown Albany where 90 some odd percent of the internet traffic that was traveling east west and north south crossed under this one intersection, and it wasn't that deep underground, and a good truck bomb right there would have messed up the entire East Coast for several weeks while they reconnected all those fiber cables. But it's no longer like that.
I think my takeaway was happy, right? I mean, because critical infrastructure is extremely important, right? But and knowing, I noticed the age of the article, right? So, and I thought, oh my gosh, I can only imagine actually how, or hopefully that it's that much better today. But that was, I mean, when I was reading through this, I was pleasantly surprised and happy that it is that robust, that there is that much. I'll say fail safe. I don't think that's the right word, but or if this connection goes down, the circuit becomes live. But because that's what we expect it to be. I think that's what, just as consumers and citizens, that's what we want this to be, and hope, I guess, that that's the way it works. That sure, if that switch gets turned off, these 3 get turned on. So yeah, if anything, I kind of had a little bit of ease after reading this article. Good.
It does happen that there are fires at data centers that are not terrorist attacks. And one of the takeaways from this is that you can build redundancy in these systems, and they go into some detail about how AWS puts things in regions and zones. And just because you've pushed your applications or your infrastructure into the cloud doesn't mean that you're automatically taking advantage of these things. And you do need to review how you set things up to make sure that you do have this redundancy beyond the one data center where you chose as your initial default data center.
I'll just comment that of the really interesting old AT&T building.
Yeah.
That always has had some mystique and some question of what is that? Is it a prison? Is it a whatever? I thought it was interesting that the article also led to that there was like, yes, this is a high level. There's some government offices in there as well, from agencies, so to speak. But I think that building's always had a lot of what is it conversations, and people always curious because it's in a unique building. And it's come up somehow in my life probably 4 or 5 times in the last like 6 months. I don't know why.
Wow.
But whether it's a
Weird.
story or somehow that a post somewhere or something. Yeah, I find that building.
And
just kind
these
of
buildings
interesting.
are all over the country, and you wouldn't know by looking at the outside. That AT&T building looks very high tech, but very often these are just old repurposed buildings that used to be a bank or an office building, and they just gut the elevator shaft and just start throwing fiber optics down the elevator shaft to cross connect all the floors. And you really need a lot of inside information to get a map of where you find all of these internet exchanges. Data centers look like data centers. But they were designed to have redundancy.
Yeah, IT as a whole, right? Like this umbrella of IT, and people will say if they find out that we're in this kind of industry, and we're in this niche of managed services, right? But people always like, oh, you're in IT. Can you tell me how to do this on the computer? Like, oh, that's not what we do. It's not the kind of thing that we do. And then you get to the data center stuff, and what I've learned. Anybody from that industry is their entire world revolves around redundancy. Right? That's their whole thing. Like, oh, I need 4 of these and 10 of these, and then I want 5 more on the shelf sitting and waiting just in case. And that is that's what they live and breathe, is just in case. Their whole life is based on just in case.
And they didn't mention in the article that a disgruntled employee is probably more dangerous than your average terrorist. And
right.
Immutability is one of the most important aspects to redundancy. You should be pushing your backups somewhere where even your own administrators can't delete them, and the company that you've given them to hold on to them has guaranteed that they won't delete anything for 30 days or 60 days or whatever you need to make you comfortable that even the most inside job will still leave your backups intact.
So it goes back to the human again, being the most vulnerable, the largest
Yeah,
vulnerability
never
in this
doubt how
scenario.
like a person will not care about civil, federal charges. They're just angry. Like never underestimate emotion.
Yeah. From clicking on the wrong email to intentionally sabotaging, data of some kind. It goes back to the human.
All right. Well, on that happy holiday note, everybody's on the naughty list this year. Forget it. All right. All right. I guess we'll wrap up then.
Just takes one bad elf.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for joining us for this week's special Deck the Halls with Holiday Tech Tips edition of the Full Scope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode, so until then, stay behind your firewall. And from all of us at Full Scope IT, happy holidays.